forward, but I'll follow your lead.
Okay. I think we'll just move ahead then. So we'll go ahead and go to 2.0, corrections and modifications to the agenda. Superintendent Macaluso.
Board member, President Voss, we can still say the Pledge of Allegiance without the image, if you want to do that.
Sure, we can go ahead and do that.
And President Voss, I've got an image here that'll work. If you give me just a moment, wait for the image. We'll go and say the pledge.
Great. If we can all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Sprouse. We'll move on then to 2.0, corrections and modifications to the agenda. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, there are no corrections or modifications to the agenda.
Then I will move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Patron, I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi?
Aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright?
Aye.
Moving on to 4.0, gifts to schools. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I would ask that the Board of Education accept the following gifts to schools in the amount of $4,560. The first gift is for 360i Certified Home Inspections, LLC, donated $360 to Dutch Clark Online as a sign sponsor for their 2020 graduates. The Lilas Foundation donated $4,200 to Minnequa Elementary School for their Hope Through Hooves program. That concludes the gifts to schools.
Then I will move that we approve and accept the gifts to schools as presented in tonight's board materials.
Second.
I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi?
Aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright?
Aye.
As always, thank you so much to all of our donors. We really do appreciate it. It does make a difference. Moving on then to 5.0, recognition. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Radford Sprouse, Dalton Sprouse, and he's our Director of Communications. And he's going to present to us tonight the 2020 scholarship recipients. Mr. Sprouse?
Thank you, Superintendent Macaluso, President Voss, and members of the Board of Education. It is now my pleasure to recognize Pueblo School District 60's class of 2020 students who have received distinguished, respected, and noteworthy scholarships. Although many of our students receive scholarships in the district, tonight we will just be recognizing those students who've received prestigious monetary awards. And first, I'd like to start with the Kane Family Foundation, a little bit of background on that. The Kane Family Foundation Scholarship is a merit-based scholarship that is awarded to 40 students who are eligible for in-state tuition to attend a participating school in the fall of 2020. Each scholarship pays for full tuition and are awarded for up to 4 years for a bachelor's degree and up to 2 years for an associate's degree. Pueblo School District 60 is proud to recognize the following students for receiving the 2020 Kane Family Foundation Scholarship. Allison Sparks from Centennial High School. Hannah Suazo from East High School. And Cameron Valdez from East High School. I'd now like to share with you a little bit about the Hurlman Scholarship. The Ehrlichman Scholarship was established to award students who demonstrated superior scholastic ability and strength of character. These students must reside in Pueblo, Fremont, or Custer County, and they can attend any accredited U.S. college or university. At this time, we'd like to recognize the following recipients: Jolie Doe from Centennial High School, Justin Schur from Centennial High School, Maya Mays Johnson, also from Centennial High School, Molly Schloss from Central High School, Megan Hibbler from South High School, and Evelyn Wright, also from South High School. It's also important to recognize that several of these students that we just acknowledged were not only recipients of the Ehrlichman Scholarship, but they also received the following prestigious scholarship awards as well. For instance, Jolie Doe also received the Stamp Scholarship from the University of Michigan. Justin Schur received the Mickelson Morey STEM Scholarship from Case Western Reserve University. Maya Mays Johnson also received a Colorado School of Mines Scholarship from the Colorado School of Mines. Molly Schloss received the Betcher Scholarship, the LSU Merit Scholarship, Loyola University Scholarship, Regis Merit Scholarship, BU Merit Scholarship. Really received a lot of awards there. And Megan Hibbler, who received the Colorado School of Mines Scholarship from the Colorado School of Mines. And now I'd like to share with you about the Betcher Scholarship. This scholarship was established in 1952 to award Colorado high school seniors who demonstrate superior scholastic ability, evidence of leadership, involvement, and service to their community and school, as well as demonstrating outstanding character. There are only 42 students selected statewide for this prestigious award. And at this time, I'd like to recognize two of them that were from our school district: Caitlin Johnston from East High School, and Ryan Bayer, also from East High School. This year, we also had a student accepted who earned an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis. Each year, thousands of applicants from young men and women are received at this prestigious institution, and only 1,200 out of over 9,000 applications are selected. The Naval Academy prepares young men and women to become professional officers of competence, character, and compassion in the U.S. Navy. At this time, we'd like to recognize Timothy Perez, who earned an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy as a member of the class of 2024. Timothy Perez is a student at Centennial High School. And now our Presidential and University College Scholarships. The Presidential and University College Scholarships are awarded to students who demonstrate superior scholastic ability and have been recognized for their success in the community and in high school. These prestigious scholars receive scholarship awards of at least $80,000 per student. At this time, we'd like to recognize the following students: Isabel Johnson from Centennial High School, Neela Rapp, Centennial High School, Lexi Williams, Centennial High School, Leila Al-Gharib from Centennial High School, and Hao Tran from Centennial High School. Also from Centennial, Corey Ray Jaramillo. And at Central High School, Abigail Gridley and Austin Ellenbach. And I'd now like to share with you about the Paragon PACE Scholarship. This scholarship is awarded to a Paragon Learning Center student who has been accepted into a 2- or 4-year college and has completed an industry certification program prior to high school graduation. This time, I'd like to recognize Blake Boone from Paragon Learning Center. Pueblo School District 60 has many other students who have received scholarships that will be utilized to enhance and support their future goals. Collectively, this group of students has received over $12 million in scholarship. We are proud of all of these students and all the great things that they have accomplished during their school years. Please join me in congratulating this outstanding class of students.
Thank you, Mr. Sprouse. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I have the great fortune of knowing many of these students on a personal basis and watching them grow. And my heart can't be more full, and I can't be more proud to know that our school district helps to shape the wonderful leaders that our students are. Our students can compete at every level throughout the nation and throughout the world. And so that's really what leading a life of purpose and impact is all about. So warm congratulations to each and every one of our students.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sprouse. And as Superintendent Macaluso said, huge congratulations to all of our students. We'll move on then to recognition of 2019-2020 retirees.
Thank you, President Voss. And as we continue to congratulate not only our students, but our staff, last month we recognized some outstanding educators in our school district. And one of the other things that we have the fortune of doing each time this time of year rolls around is honoring some amazing people that have contributed really the better part of their life to not only our school district, but more importantly to our students. And so this year, obviously in this virtual environment, we're in a little bit of a different space. And normally we would love to bring in all these great individuals and shake their hands and congratulate them in person. But this is kind of the next best thing. And so what we wanted to do is we reached out to people who have worked with our retirees and asked them to share with us some information about these amazing individuals that we'd like to share with you tonight and with our community. To further advance this effort, we've shared a lot of this information on social media. We're getting a lot of great traffic as it is already. But most importantly, this evening in this presentation, we just like to honor them. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about some of these remarkable individuals. If you don't mind, I'll just kind of read these quotes to you. I know they're on the screen, but I think they're impactful. So first, I'd like to recognize Miss Mariani, who's a reading interventionist at Baca Elementary. Those that wrote about her said her responsibility to all students and their successes was seen in her heartfelt loyalty to each child who entered her classroom. And above and beyond to help anyone, a simple thank you would never be enough for everything that she has done at Eva Baca Elementary. And I'd like to now talk about Miss Wahebe McDowell. And I apologize if I did not get that right. I wrote it down. I tried my best. So words about her that was the best words to describe her are passionate, transparent, sensitive, and joyful. She has a deep love of the Latin American culture, especially the music and dance, but also the literature and the politics, and that she shared that in abundance. Trudy will be truly missed as a part of our Spanish program at Centennial, in the Centennial Bulldog family that she has been a part of for the past 17 years. Mr. Mead. Jay has helped us mold countless individuals into doctors, engineers, computer programmers, educators, and so much more. Jay is one of the most brilliant people you could know, and that is because he is very passionate about his learning and education. No matter whether it's at a faculty meeting, a classroom, or a lunchroom, everyone in the room knows Jay is the smartest guy there. If anyone wants to know thoughts on a complicated matter, no matter what the subject is, Jay is your go-to guy. Jay's a science teacher at Centennial High School. And Ms. Sosa, the attendance secretary at Centennial High School. Linda is an exemplary attendance secretary, conscientious of her job responsibilities and dedicated to the students and staff at Centennial High School. Her bulldog spirit, along with her wit and compassion for our Centennial families, will be missed by both our parents and students. personality shined through every day, and it was hard not to smile after having a passing conversation with her. Mr. Santry, language arts teacher at Central High School. Coach Santry would light up a room with a smile, especially in his classroom. His sense of humor is what the staff will miss most. He liked to be silly and yet serious. Mr. Santry has always been a fan of the blue and white. Both of his boys graduated from Central High School, and his oldest is also employed at Central High School. We will miss seeing him in the fourth floor, always greeting students as they entered his classroom. And Mr. Vukolich, campus security at Central High School. His first name is Ron. Ron is Central. Every morning, Ron would be in the foyer greeting everyone that walked into the building, ready for school and ready for the day. Ron is one of the most caring people we know. He always thinks of kids. He is truly a wildcat and definitely bleeds blue. And Mr. Gavato, second grade teacher at Columbian Elementary. Mr. Gavato is a strong pillar in our Columbian community. Mr. Gavato works diligently to provide our under-resourced students enlightening experiences through meaningful and engaging activities such as Flat Stanley. He is definitely the kind of teacher who goes the extra mile for the students in his care. And Coach Laughlin, who's a counselor at East High School, also a wrestling coach, but Pat Laughlin has been a part of the fabric of East High School for decades, and he delivered a state wrestling title in 2019. Though he will continue to coach, Mr. Laughlin sums up his career as a very rewarding experience, being able to inspire students, help them with their struggles, and make them smile at their achievements. Working alongside many great people and being a part of the East High family and community has been very fulfilling and enjoyable for him all of these years. And Ms. Lane, literacy coach over at Franklin School of Innovation. Under her soft-spoken general approach to teaching, hundreds of kids have learned and flourished. She has made an invaluable impact on the minds and hearts of hundreds of students that she has served, providing students with a broad base of knowledge that has endured well beyond their elementary school years. Vonda will be missed greatly, not only at Franklin, but in the community of teachers she has helped in the numerous other schools she served. And Ms. Swazo, a media specialist also at Franklin. Ms. Swazo is the light of our school and has spent many hours making sure all students have the books to fill their minds and hearts. She has always given Franklin students her love and attention, and all students knew that they were her favorite. Annette has left a paw print on the hearts of hundreds of students she has served with the educational experiences that they will never forget. And Ms. Montoya, early childhood over at Goodnight. Many young leaders started their education realizing that school could be an adventurous journey under Wanda's guidance. Many students in her care were leaving their parents and guardians for the first time, and Wanda was brilliant in transitioning these young lives from home to school with the understanding that love and care do not end at home, but can be experienced through her kind words and reassurances. She developed and fostered positive relationships with parents, grandparents, and guardians. Ms. Zerfus, educational secretary over at Goodnight. Mary was the welcoming face of our school where every student, parent, and staff were greeted with her brilliant smile and compassionate ear. We at Goodnight counted on her wit to enhance our celebrations and her comedic relief to get us through the stressful moments. Although Mary has definitely deserved the right to spend the next years with her loved ones and friends, she would be greatly missed and almost impossible to replace. And Marcia Griglak, kindergarten teacher at Hoff. You probably remember her name from last month's meeting. She was one of our Colorado Teacher of the Year honorees. Ms. Griglak is warm and caring, and she works diligently to build a personal and positive relationship with every single student and their family. Ms. Griglak gives of her own time and resources without even thinking twice. Her contributions to our Hoff community will be remembered for many years to come, and her daily presence will be greatly missed by all. And Mr. Escobedo, 4th grade over at Heritage, is a former Marine. Mr. Escobedo prided himself with honor, courage, and commitment, and made it his goal to instill these values in his students. It was never uncommon for Mr. Escobedo to receive tamales, banana bread, and even menudo from previous students he taught. These students knew the way to his heart was through his stomach. Mr. Escobedo was an extremely generous person, and I truly believe that he continued to work as long as he did, so he had plenty of money to help anyone in need. Thank you, Mr. Escobedo. And Ms. Gonzalez, 2nd grade over at Heritage Elementary. Each year, Mrs. Gonzalez took great pride in preparing her room as visually organized and precise learning environment. Not only did she hold her students to a higher standard, she also molded that within herself. Creating memories for her students was one of her special talents, and the love and devotion she has given our students is what we will all miss most. Ms. Vaughn, 2nd grade teacher at Heritage. The impact a teacher has on their students isn't always noticed immediately, but it is measured by the memories students have as they look back on their elementary days and have the same picture of a teacher who was a gentle spirit like Mrs. Vaughn. Mrs. Vaughn had a very special way with boys who were on her spirited side, or on the spirited side. Mrs. Vaughn has selflessly given her time to support a Heritage community for over 2 decades. Mrs. Vaughn is Heritage. Mr. Jones, music teacher at Highland Park Elementary. Mr. Jones has made a huge impact at Highland Park that will not be forgotten. Mr. Jones has created many traditions that will remain in place at Highland Park, such as the all-school musical, a yearly talent show, singing Christmas carols to a community assisted living center, and the limbo for every field day. Mr. Jones was not only a music instructor, he was also a mentor and a friend to many. Miss Robinson, 3rd grade teacher at Highland Park. Mrs. Robinson always has a smile on her face and a lot of energy. She knew a lot about technology, so when someone needed assistance, she was always there to help out. If she didn't know the answer to a question, you better believe that she was going to find the answer. We will miss her sparkling personality in the staff lounge and her nurturing of students in her classroom. And Ms. Lopez, Child Find Educational Assistant. Stella has always been willing to go above and beyond to lend a helping hand to any of her coworkers. Her service, support, loyalty, and professionalism have always been appreciated by those she worked for. Her love of family and her deep devotion to her faith makes her a very strong individual. And Ms. Madrid, Educational Assistant at Paragon. Our students have benefited from her support and care. Michelle has spent countless hours supporting our students and making sure that they have access to our online curriculum. Students respond to her because they know she cares. Michelle is extremely dependable and has assisted our counseling department, our administration team, and has served committees to support student success. Ms. Sanchez, a counselor over at Paragon. What makes Anita so special is that she's always willing to do what is best for students. Her experience working with the most at-risk of students has benefited the entire community. She has spent countless hours working directly with families to ensure that they have what they need to survive and be successful. And Ms. Eleftheritis, Apex teacher at Pueblo Youth Services Center. Her ability to develop lasting student-teacher relationships has been consistent day in and day out throughout her entire career with this district. She has a truly unique ability to give her students the instruction, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of academics and continual retention of educational growth that young people take with them in life. She is well liked and appreciated because she makes the effort to be non-judgmental, caring, and understanding. And Mr. Coletti, Apex over at Roncalli STEM Academy. Mr. Coletti is very good-natured, fun to work with, and very creative in the work he produced with the students. Mr. Coletti wowed the staff of Roncalli by donning many different wigs and hats during his online staff meetings, bringing much-needed laughter in uncertain times. Mr. Horton, counselor at Roncalli STEM Academy. At Roncalli, Mr. Horton developed a single-gender education program for core classes that led Roncalli to being featured in a Newsweek cover story. 8 years ago, Mr. Horton was on the team that gained Roncalli innovation status, and resulted in its rebranding as a STEM Academy. Mr. Horton researched and then facilitated the adoption of No Bully as a pilot program at Roncalli before it was adopted by the district. Mr. Horton is known for his humor, being a voracious reader, and some good-natured grunting. Miss Perea, Spanish teacher at South High School. Senora Perea exemplifies everything that an excellent world language teacher should be: accepting, open-minded, and willing to challenge the way the students look at themselves and their place in the world. Through engaging with authentic lessons, Senora Perea has taught thousands of students that one of the most important lessons you can learn in life is that every culture, every language, and every person has critical and valuable role to play in this world. And Ms. Panunzio, literacy coach at South Park Elementary. Ms. Panunzio is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all things reading. She always has a smile on her face and all the students love her. Sue has been a vital part of South Park for the past 4 years. She has brought a great insight to our staff in the area of reading. Her organizational skills and data collection cannot be measured. Miss Nchidi, a kindergarten teacher at Sunset Park Elementary. Mrs. Nchidi was a charismatic and engaging educator. She had a song to teach anything and a real strength in the instruction of literacy. Although she was only with us for a few years, she will be missed. We wish her the very best in retirement and hope her future in regards to horse therapy continues to support the various needs of the children and families of our community. And Mr. Combs, a paraprofessional at Sunset. Mr. C has a larger-than-life personality. He always seemed to find himself right in the middle of a friendly banter in the mornings around staff mailboxes waiting to clock in. His support of the SLD program and check-in, check-out process has helped countless yearlings over his time at Sunset Park. He will certainly be missed, and we wish him all the very best in retirement. And Miss Nave Woodson. We in ESS want to celebrate the retirement of Diana Nave Woodson, a great colleague and friend. After 19 years with Pueblo School District 60, Miss Nave Woodson will retire from being a community transition coach at the CT House. Diana has been part of the CT House from its beginning stages. She has taught many students to cook, clean, and believe in their unique ability. Diana will be greatly missed by the students and the staff at the CT House. And the president of the Pueblo Education Association, Suzanne Etheridge, her dedicated service to the educators and students in our school district has been extraordinary. Throughout her career, she has supported and represented teachers in the school district and in the Pueblo community. She has worked in collaboration with our administration on behalf of educators and is a true champion for public education. Her tenacious advocacy for the teachers of B60 has raised the esteem for teachers throughout our community. And Karine Arriaga, a benefits manager in human resources. Mrs. Arriaga has made a meaningful impact on programs and employees district-wide. Karine has supported all employees in the district with every aspect of health insurance and benefits. Her work ethic, dedication, and positive attitude have made the Human Resource Office and the district a better place. If you don't know, Karine also makes the most delicious birthday cake that you can even imagine. And Ms. Joan McDonald, supervisor in human resources. Joan is a very compassionate and hard worker. She's very detail-oriented and has a truly amazing memory. If you ever need to know something that happened in the past, just ask Joan. She never forgets anything. Joan lives by her unwavering faith, and it shines through in all aspects of her life. She has been an icon of the Human Resources Department and our district for years. She will be greatly missed. And Mr. White, math specialist in the admin building. Both as a teacher and as an administrator, Mr. White has let his passion for kids show through every single day. Mr. White was motivated by finding that spark when kids discovered their passion for math and did whatever he could do to empower this passion. And lastly, Mr. Bob Caricato, Executive Director of Secondary Education. Whether it was working as a school administrator or a district administrator, Mr. Caricato always had the best interests of kids in mind. Mr. Caricato believed that kids truly found their passion in high school, and he wanted kids to discover what will make them successful. Again, I just want to thank all of our staff, and we've got so many amazing people and amazing stories to tell in our school district, and I'm proud to know so many of them. And it's a great honor to recognize not only our existing teachers and students that are receiving outstanding scholarships, but also these teachers that have been with our school district for several years in our now retiring. We wish them the best.
Thank you, Mr. Sprouse, for highlighting our very talented and dedicated employees. I am honored to have worked alongside many of those individuals. And so I wish them abundant and in their new journey. So thank you again, Mr. Sprouse, for recognizing them, and I thank them for their dedicated service to our organization. You are all difference makers, and you are all appreciated. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you to all of our retirees, and we wish you all nothing but the very best in retirement. Moving on now to public comment, Mr. Sprouse.
Thank you, President Voss. We did not receive any public comments for today's meeting.
Okay, then we will move to 7.0, communications and board comments. Are there any communications from the board? Superintendent Macaluso, do you have any communications?
I do not at this time. Thank you.
Then we will move to 8.0, special resolutions. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. This is a resolution supporting the Fair Tax Colorado Ballot Initiative, number 271. I think this is a resolution that Board Member Clementi had asked that we put on at a previous board meeting. So we have that here for your consideration. So we would entertain a board member reading that.
I would be happy to if that's acceptable.
Sure.
Please.
Well, thank you, President Voss. Whereas the Board of Education of Pueblo School District number 60 believes that every student should have the opportunity to reach his or her full potential and to participate meaningfully in the civic and economic life of the community, regardless of their zip code or learning needs. And whereas the board believes that quality public education develops a competitive workforce that will drive a vibrant Colorado economy for decades to come. And whereas education funding in this state has not recovered from the Great Recession, and in 2019-2020 school year alone, Colorado schools were underfunded by $572 million. And whereas the loss to funding to this district, has been over $165,273,404 since 2009, which could have been used for hiring and retaining highly qualified teachers and staff, providing more competitive compensation and benefit packages for district employees, reinstating various educational programs for students, purchasing new textbooks, addressing deferred maintenance in buildings and facilities, increasing school supply allocations, supporting additional professional development and training, and reestablishing critical cash reserves. And whereas Colorado is currently experiencing and will be recovering from the economic toll and human impacts from the coronavirus 2019 global pandemic, and whereas education funding is projected to diminish even further in the 2020-21 coming school year, and whereas reduced funding is directly impacting the district's ability to provide meaningful educational opportunities for all students. And whereas reduced funding also limits the board's ability to respond to parent and community input on the district's programs and services. And whereas recent studies demonstrate that well-targeted dollars will have a direct and positive effect on student outcomes, and that improving education in Colorado would generate billions of dollars for the economy by increasing the number of graduates with sufficient post-secondary education to meet workforce demands. And wherefore, after 10 years of these improvements, Colorado could be expected to see more than 57,000 more high school graduates earning some form of post-secondary education, the exponential impacts of which would mean $8.6 billion in additional earnings over those 10 years, 14,600 new jobs created each year by the 10th year, with that number continuing to increase annually, an increase in spending on housing by $1.4 billion over the decade, an increase in spending on automobiles and parts by 472 million over the decade, almost $1 billion increase in new revenue and savings from lower rates of incarceration and fewer people relying on public assistance, and an additional $12 billion added to the gross GDP over the decade. Whereas Fair Tax Colorado, which is ballot initiative 271, will provide desperately needed funding to support schools as they weather the economic toll of the global pandemic by assisting schools in providing students educational opportunities to prepare them for success in college, career, and life, preparing a qualified workforce for decades to come, and ensuring that Colorado's economic prosperity is shared with every community in the state. And whereas Fair Tax Colorado will create a tiered tax structure where 100% of Coloradoans receive a tax cut on the first $250,000 of taxable income, as it lowers the current 4.63% tax to 4.58%. And 50% of revenue raised would be dedicated to pre-primary through 12th grade education. And taxpayers across all income levels will pay a more equal portion of their income in state and local taxes. And whereas Fair Tax Colorado gives local school boards greater ability to respond to parent and community input and provide programs and services to meet the needs of all students. And whereas the Board of Education has identified the following funding priorities: hiring and retaining highly qualified teachers and staff, providing more competitive compensation and benefit packages for district employees, reinstating various educational programs for students, purchasing new textbooks, addressing deferred maintenance in buildings and facilities, increasing school supply allocations, supporting additional professional development and training, and reestablishing critical cash reserves. And whereas if the district receives these new funds, the Board of Education commits to using these funds to address those foregoing needs and priorities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Pueblo School District Number 60 officially declares its support for Fair Tax Colorado for the purpose of increasing funding of public education in the state of Colorado. I'll put this resolution before the board, if I may, Mr. President, as in the form of a motion.
I'll second.
I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays, Judge Mays,
Judge Mays, your mic is muted.
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
We will move on then to 9.0 reports. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Ted Johnson, who serves as Executive Director of Continuous Improvement and Innovation, and he's going to provide you with an update regarding the Community Schools Exploratory Committee. I believe the last time that they presented to the board was in January. And so, Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Superintendent Macaluso, and good evening. Good evening, President Voss and members of the board. This evening, I am pleased to provide you with an update regarding the work of the Community Schools Exploratory Committee, which is a joint task force developed as part of last year's negotiated agreement with the district and the Pueblo Education Association to explore the feasibility of implementing a community schools model within District 60. As you may recall, in January, Suzanne Etheridge and I presented information about community schools and our committee with the intention to bring our team to the May board meeting, this meeting, to share our findings. While we're very excited to share what we have learned, our committee feels that it's really vital to have the opportunity to present our findings to you in person. And so we are therefore targeting a date in September in the hopes that we'll be able to come back and do so at that time. And you can hear the voices of our committee members. Tonight, on behalf of the committee, I would like to present just a brief update on our work. Certainly a lot has transpired since January, but our Community Schools Exploratory Committee has continued to meet and work virtually during the last couple of months. Since that January meeting, we've had members of our group visit community schools throughout the nation. Prior to the shutdown, one of our community members, Mr. Donald Moore, had the opportunity to visit a community school in Austin, Texas. And he came away really impressed with the program there. It's been there for several years. And he was able to talk with them and then came back and shared a lot of what he learned with our team at one of our meetings this winter. Also prior to the shutdown, several of our committee members, including Justina Carter and Denise Torres, participated in a trip sponsored by the Pueblo Education Coalition to a community school in Taos, New Mexico. They too shared their findings in a joint presentation with PEC to our committee. We also had a chance to visit virtually with Mr. Kyle Surratt from the National Education Association. Kyle has been deeply involved in community school implementation across the country for several years, and he was able to provide us with a broad array of information and resources, which our community has found especially useful. And so on the basis of this work, our team has continued to develop answers to the feasibility questions that we presented to you back in January. Such as, what are the conditions and criteria that should be in place at a school for a community school model to be successful? What are the roles of the various stakeholders in the community school model? What are the benefits and positive impacts for a community schools model within the district? And what are the barriers and challenges that need to be addressed in order to implement an effective community schools model? As we seek to answer these and other questions, we are finding many positive impacts that a community schools approach can have for our district. A community school can serve as a hub within a neighborhood, helping to align and organize the support of the many agencies and organizations in Pueblo that are dedicated to supporting our citizens. This coordination occurs intentionally and is driven by a comprehensive needs assessment with broad outreach to the school community. The model supports a strong community voice and actively engages families, providing needed resources, and helping to demystify the school experience. Schools become more accessible to families, and this allows them to navigate the needs of their students more effectively. And when families feel comfortable and at home in their schools, we can see an increase in meaningful parent engagement and a decrease in student absenteeism. The potential impact of these two components make the community schools model worthy of consideration in and of itself. What we've also learned through this exploration is that we do not have to do this alone. Successful community schools draw on the support of community partners, organizations, and resources. They help to address issues of planning, logistics, implementation, and financial considerations. The more that folks have skin in the game, so to speak, the more likely we are to see a successful model. We've also realized that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can apply the lessons learned from other community schools to our own implementation here in Pueblo. And there are a number of resources, including planning toolkits, that we can customize to fit the unique needs of Pueblo. We can also explore grants and other funding sources to support the cost of implementation. There are costs associated with this model, but these are essential to have a successful rollout. For example, one such cost is hiring a community school coordinator to oversee the planning, development, and implementation of the model. So we're very excited at this point by the answers we are finding through this exploration, and we realize there's still a lot more work to be done. Our group has committed to continued meeting and discussion over the summer, and we'll work further to answer these feasibility questions in more detail and to refine our presentation with the goal of bringing it back for further discussion with all of you in September. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
And I'll go ahead and go down the line. That way everybody gets their opportunity. Dr. Wright?
I don't have a question, but thank you very much for the diligence of the committee in working towards this community schools development. Thank you, sir.
Judge Mays?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, and the whole committee. It sounds like there's a lot of work going on, which is exciting. I'm glad to hear that so many connections have been made with existing community schools to learn from what's working and what challenges there might exist. And I'm sad that we don't get the whole committee tonight, but I look forward to seeing the whole committee soon.
Ms. Clemente?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, and your committee for your work and for this good information. To be clear, the community schools model that you're talking about and that you all are researching is the NEA model, yes?
Correct. That's the one that we've looked at different things, but that's the one we've had certainly the most discussion on.
And certainly it's my experience that the NEA doesn't do anything that's not well thought out and founded in success. When you talked about cost, you mentioned a coordinator, which makes sense. Are there additional costs to this model?
We would certainly anticipate that there are some additional costs. What makes that question kind of difficult to answer is that a lot of it's driven by this needs assessment that you complete.
Yeah.
And so what does the community need? That could incur some costs. Some of the things we've identified in addition to a coordinator are some smaller things, some things like, you need to have some budget for printing and for materials and things like that. A lot of the training looks to be little or no cost from what we've seen so far. There's the potential, a lot of the community schools have developed a space within a school that's kind of a space for families that could potentially have some costs in terms of furnishing that space, or if there was necessary, sometimes in a school you need to build a separator or a wall or something to create a place. So those are really the costs that we've identified to this point.
Terrific, thank you. And thank you and your committee again.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for you and all the committee's hard work. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the second and third quarter financial reports.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Dave Horner.
Good evening. I am going to share my screen. Do we have a second quarter report up for you to see?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Is it large enough? I guess I'm always questioning whether I need to blow it up more to see numbers and things, but we'll go with this. So we have 2 quarterly reports for you. We kind of got a little bit behind on the second quarter with the virus activities and things, but this gets us back up to date. When we look at the revenues for the second quarter in 18-19, we had collected 40.7%, and in 19-20, 44.1% of our revenue. So we're up 3.4% in a comparison of the 2 years. So we're right in the ranges where we would expect to be at 50% through the year. We're just under collected for the year, but that's not something that we wouldn't expect when we are tracking that over the 2 years. As we look at the expenditure side, we had in 18-19 36.4%, and in 19-20 36.2%, so slightly down, but tracking in the same percentages. So nothing that would draw any attention for me. We have included here a pie chart that shows the expenditures as to what the different categories are within the district. And you'll notice that salaries at 60.6 and fringe benefits at 21.6. So you've got 82.2% of our budget is spent on salaries and benefits. We also have a part of our purchase services is really staff. Like in some of our special education programs, we may not be able to hire a full-time person, and so we contract out with companies to provide us services. So those really are, people serving our students. As we compare the second, the budget from our adopted budget, I'm very content with where the second quarter was sitting as we tracking for the year. I guess if there's any questions related to the second quarter, I'd be glad to answer them before I go on to the third quarter. It's okay. Did that change to the third quarter? Do you see a third quarter pie?
Yes.
All right, I'm getting pretty sophisticated here in this virtual meetings then.
Don't get carried away, Dave.
All right, third quarter. As we compare for the third quarter, our revenues are at, in 18-19, 65.7, and in 19-20, 64.7. So it's down 1%, but in the overall, that's, nothing that it would concern me. We get different timings of when payments come in that cross the lines of the quarters, so that's not an issue to me. On the expenditure side, we were 60.4 for 18-19 and 56.8 for 19-20, so we're down 3.6. But we also need to remember that we started our COVID activity and teaching from home and not, we had a freeze going on. So I would expect slight down in expenditures. I would expect to see considerably more down in expenditures during the fourth quarter. On that, as we look at the pie chart, you'll see we have 62.1 and 21.3 for 83.4, plus there's still the purchase services. So you're pushing very, plus or minus of 85% of our budget is salaries and benefits. We're a people business, and that really reflects in the way our budget is set up. I'm very content that we're tracking for the year. We do include and compare to the amended budget, which you'll notice is in the yellow. We have included the adopted budget, but we need to concentrate on the amended budget because that's our latest numbers as far as that goes. So if there's any questions related to the third quarter, I would be glad to answer them at this time. Okay. I believe I am next on the list too.
That is
Yes.
correct. So, Mr. Horner, if you want to continue on with the 2021 proposed budget update.
We're trying to get that reloaded here. Do you have some numbers on the screen?
Yes.
All right. Okay. As we are continuing our budget discussions for the 2021 school year, we have built several models and considerations, and I'm going to kind of go down through this and show you where our thoughts are at this time. Almost daily, there is another article or something out of the JBC telling us some different information. The revenue shortfall seems to continue to go up every time somebody quotes a number. We went from 1 billion to 2 billion to 3 billion to 3.3, and I've heard 3.5 now. So the hole on the state level is massive. I think that's the understatement out of that conversation. As we're modeling, we use a cohort survival model, and the model itself says we will be down in enrollment 350 students. We have made an adjustment, like we talked at the last board meeting, of another 100 student reduction because of COVID. Very questionable whether that is the magic number or what parents will decide as we look at what our educational model is next fall, but that's the number that we are using. We have a funded count estimate, including charters for next fall, of 16,261.2. After you take out the charters, that's 14,543.2. That is after the averaging that is in the funding model. A 5% reduction model, which is the version 1 budget that we presented last time to you, would have a $10 million cut, including charters, and then a $9.5 million without charters. And then you can follow down a 7.5% cut with a 13 and a 12. Cut 10%, 17 and 15, and on down to base funding is basically the floor of where they could take us to, which is a 19.11% cut, which would be almost $30 million with charters and just over 27 million to us. Off to the right of this chart, I've tried to say the difference from 5% to 7.5% is another 3.12 million cut, and then to 10% is another 3.1 or another 6.2. If you want to go to 12.5, we need to end up with another 9.3 million cut on top of the 5 million. I mean the 5% cut. These are all accumulative. So in the document that you were presented last time, version 1 of our budget, we had the declining enrollment of 350 for the model. the additional 100 for the COVID. There was no COLAs, no steps for any staff. And there was also no layoffs of any staff in any of these documents that I'm talking about tonight. That for me and for the superintendent and actually the governor is a very important point, is to get us out of this situation. We need everybody working and creating and generating tax revenues and things to help us all work our way out of it. So that has been a component that we have really tried to do within these documents. All right, in the document that we had presented last week, we reduced capital transfers 1.4 million for maintenance. That still left them with 4.4 million. We reduced capital transfers for technology by 100,000. That still left them 900,000. In January, in our amended budget, we had set aside 500,000 for outfitting the new high schools within the bond for items that you cannot pay for out of the bond. In this document, I also set aside another 500,000, so there would be $1 million total at this time. We reduced curriculum by 67,500, still leaving them 1.13 million, and we were allowing all the carryover from the school budgets. Just as a reference point in the documents that I just showed you, when you think about salaries and benefits are, pushing 85% or more than 85 if you take purchase services. When you start talking about a 10 to a 15% cut, you can't take away all of these little sections. That's our utilities, our copiers, and everything. So anything we do affects people. That's the main thing with this graph. When you look at 83.4% in the third quarter, and then you still have parts of this 8.4%. One of the items that will continue to be looked at and talked about with you as the board is the statute about fiscal emergency. We've been having conversations with our attorney related to, is this declared before the budget is done, or is it after this budget is done in the next fiscal year? If more cuts come, when is this statute relevant? So that conversation is going to continue. We are aware of it, and it is a fiscal emergency. It's just, how do you declare it and when would you declare it as far as that goes? Okay, so now as that's kind of up to where we're at this point. Today I was reading the information that the JBC is putting out about proposals to the legislature and reductions. They're also talking about, should they reduce kindergarten funding back to 0.58? Should they do away with cost of living increases, and multiple different pieces of how they're going to get to the balanced budget that they need. Talking with Tracy Rainey from Colorado Finance Project today, her best estimate is still close to a 15% cut by the time they get done. So we are working toward that with our next document. So I have a document that will be presented to you by May 31st as required. And we are finalizing that document now. In this document, we have two different conversations going on. To get us to a 10% reduction, we are proposing 2 furlough days for everyone in the district. My interpretation was that it required the passage of this. The attorneys is now saying maybe it doesn't at this moment require the passage of this, but that's the way the wording I have here. So that's a future conversation we're still figuring out the timing of. I am proposing a 2% salary reduction, which is then $1.8 million And that's 100% of all salaries across the board. All staff, all different groups, from administration on down. I'm proposing to reduce capital transfer for maintenance by $1 million. That still leaves $3.4 million. Reducing capital transfers for technology by another $200,000. That still leaves $700,000. Reducing curriculum by $500,000. Reducing PD out of general fund by $25,000. In doing 2 lines for reduction of the school's carryover, reducing $400,000 in 1 line and reducing the balance of it in a second line. So as we were having conversations, we could talk about it in 2 different ways. Reducing the reserve, the additional $500,000 for the 2021 for the new building, and also reducing the reserve for the new building from January's 1920. So at the end of this column, there is no reserve for the new building. We're proposing to take off the one last school bus route serving Corwin and Fountain for $50,000. Reduce the transfer to athletics for $100,000. Look at, can we reduce supplies in the general fund some more? Don't have a dollar amount on it. $10,000 out of state travel. A lot of our out of state travel is grant funded. We have some other line items that we're still trying to look at and have conversations about. Reduce in-state travel, can reduce some of our outside contracted vendors, innovation days, extra days, AVID, additional staff in the STEM schools. Do we need to talk about layoffs? Our hopes is that no, we don't need to. We, at this time, do not have any layoff of staff, and we don't have any closing of schools in here. This generates $6.3 million, which gets us to a 10% cut budget. That still isn't matching the targets that we're told that we need to look at. So as we look to go from a 10% to a 15% reduction, which this column does not get us there, it gets us to about a 12.5% reduction. And this column is a cumulative on top of both the 5% and the 10% sections. So the proposal is adding 3 more furlough days, which would be 5 furlough days. Reduce capital transfer for maintenance, another $750,000, so they'd still have $2.65 million. Reduce another $100,000 out of capital transfer for technology, so they'd be down to $600,000. Reduce new curriculum by $532,000. Which leaves them about $100,000, which is nothing. Reduce athletics by $100,000, so that's $200,000 when you add the 2 together. Reduce supplies by $50,000. Some more travel, trying to restrict. We're all getting better at Zoom and Google, so trying to reduce more in-state travel, and still conversations of all the other pieces that we're looking at to see what else we could find. Because if we need to go to the 15%, this is at 12.5, and it's about another $3 million that we would have to look for if that is the final target. So the document that I am going to present to you by the 31st will include a 12.5% reduction and be a balanced budget. So I'm open for questions.
And again, we'll go down the line. Dr. Wright.
Thank you, Ms. Dorner, for your presentation. I also want to thank you so much for answering several questions. A lot of my questions on yesterday when we talked, but I just had a couple of more. The instructional model for the fall, I know right now we really don't know fully what that is going to be, but I wasn't sure, number one, if this information was based on us continuing the online learning with instructional packets, or did this reflect the in-person with some modification approach? Can you speak to that, or you are the superintendent?
From my side, this is a business as usual model. And then there is all the CARES money that is coming in that will allow us to spend for the new activities, but we don't even have that defined from my point to know what that cost is. I'm not sure what else the superintendent would like to add.
Sure. I would say what's troubling and problematic is that this budget is for a business as usual model, and we know that it won't be business as usual. So we know that probably come the fall, we may need to enact a hybrid model, have additional cleaning supplies, that sort of thing. What is implementing social distancing look like? And what are all the costs associated with what schooling looks like in the fall? So that really is a concern and a consideration that we're still planning for and thinking about.
I can appreciate that. I think we all agree there's something we've never gone through before. And so I understand that a lot of this is, we're just going to have to make decisions the best that we know how as we move forward. So does this impact, seeing that we may end up having to do online in some respect, or getting technology to people in some respect? You talked about not transferring the capital transfer technology. Would that need to be changed, or that would remain the same?
A lot of that money is used for our replacement plan. And I'm sure that Zach is cringing in the background as he hears these numbers, because the $1 million that we have been transferring does not meet our 5-year replacement cycle, and we continue to add more equipment. So it's not going the right direction for what we would really like to be doing. I fully admit that, but I don't know where else to make cuts.
I understand. The last question I have dealt with, I know we were talking about options, and I saw where D70 was trying to move available central off administrative staff to open positions. Is that an option for us? Would that allow us in any way to save money?
No.
If that was possible for us?
That I defer to the superintendent who makes those decisions.
Sure. I think that's always an option. I think what's problematic for our district is that over the last 4 or 5 years, we have really taken significant cuts in terms of staffing, both in administration and every level, elementary, middle, and high school, and have absorbed several grants like the Counselor Corps grant, et cetera. So, going to a 4-day work week a couple of years ago and reduction in staffing overall is really where we have taken our cuts. And so we're kind of bare bones, but that doesn't mean that we don't always look at opportunities or what positions in terms of staffing that we could fill or not fill.
Okay, I just want to thank you again, Mr. Horn, and your staff. I know it's very difficult having to have a 5%, 10%, 15%, and then we really don't know. But I can appreciate so much the work that you've put in to show us a picture of what we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you much.
Judge Mays.
No questions.
Mr. Farrell.
I have one at least, I think. Mr. Horner, thank you and your staff for trying to do the best that you can to plan for so many unknowns at this point. I really appreciate the breakdown of different levels of funding shortfalls here to see what those impacts could potentially mean. I listened to the JBC some today as they were talking about education, and I know they're going to hopefully give us some almost solid answers tomorrow. So I look forward to hearing that, but of course, those can always change as the budget continues through the process. In regards to the CARES funds that you mentioned, there was the original announcement of a disbursement that was included directly in what the federal government sent. And then there was the executive order from the governor yesterday or earlier this week, I guess that was yesterday, about more CARES funding being dispersed to districts. And I just wanted to clarify that both of those disbursements, the two separate ones, have, I don't know that I necessarily want to say strings attached, but they have requirements of how you can use those funds, both different sets. Is that correct?
Yes, and I would say there are definitely a lot of strings attached or restrictions. Yes, we don't have all the guidance yet on how you can spend it, but we are definitely, looking at that, and obviously we'll apply. You have to turn in an application, and we will do the best we can. And a lot of that, it has to be directly COVID related. So.
Right. And it's not just funds that we can throw into the general budget and use to backfill some of these other shortfalls, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time and effort, as always.
Ms. Clementi.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Mr. Horner, for all of this work. Would you, we basically have a budget that's about $130 million, a little less, I think. Is that accurate?
General fund is, 130 to 140, depending on what level we're at.
And we're looking at a 15% possible cut?
Yes.
Of the state's contribution, which for us is about 80%. Is that right?
Well, it's, the PPR includes the local funding and the state funding into the calculation. But when you look at a 15% here, that would be 22 million cut on our side if you don't count charters.
Right. $22 million that we have to cut out of our budget. Do you anticipate any issues with property tax collection this year?
So the April collection, as we talked about at the last meeting, was slightly up.
Good.
One of the things that we're hearing is mortgage companies will not let the taxes lapse because that affects their standing. If they had to repo, somebody could buy in ahead of them. So where most of us have mortgages on property, those are still being paid. So
that's good to know.
At this time, there is not a shortage. Now, it may be slightly delayed or something and affect our cash flow. So we're constantly monitoring that for the month of June. But
right.
I don't know how much it'll really affect. Do we collect, normally we get like 98% collections. Is it going to be 96 or 94? I don't know. Or hopefully it's not in the 70s or something.
Right, exactly. Okay, thank you. That information about the mortgage companies makes good sense and is good to know. We're cutting $1 million out of the supplies for the new buildings. This is stuff that I thought I heard you say that can't be paid out of the bond. What kinds of things would those be covering, or that would be missing if we make those cuts?
Like when you set up a new CTE lab or something, you can pay for the main saws and to outfit the classroom, but you may not be able to buy all the hand tools or the pieces that really make it work. And the science classroom, some of the parts that you need, those kind of things that make it really function well.
And we're prohibited from using bond money to purchase those things?
There is restrictions, and so you have to really watch what kind of asset is it considered, and, you know, can you pay for it with bond funds or not? Is it a consumable? You know, there's a whole set of guidance out there that we have to refer to.
Okay, that's
I,
good.
I can provide that to you, but not right at this minute.
Sure, sure. The budget that you're preparing, you said would be a 12.5% reduction.
Yes.
And I appreciate all the work that will go into that. I have to say that from everything I've heard, that we have to anticipate more than that. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understand that even after you've gone to all the work of preparing a balanced budget for us at 12.5% reduction, that chances are very, very good that the final budget will look different than that, drastically different, unfortunately. I want to remind everybody that along with the cuts we're talking about, there are increases to para, increases to para that the board has to, not the board, I'm sorry, the district will have to pay, and increases that employees will have to pay. Is that right?
That is correct. The increases on the district side are already calculated into this document.
Okay, good. And lastly, I'd like to affirm that that for me, and I hope for the rest of the board, the assumption that as we make these cuts, protecting staff and maintaining our employees at the level and that we have, and not incurring layoffs is definitely a priority for me. So I thank you for mentioning that and for keeping that in the forefront. I think we should all keep that as a priority. Thanks again for your work, and hope everyone will do some advocacy with the legislature and the governor. There's only so much money to go around. We've got to find another way to fund our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horner, to you and your team for all of your hard work.
Okay.
We'll move on now to 10.0 policy. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I would ask that the board consider and approve the modifications to board policy JICDA, the code of conduct, and JKD, JKE, suspension, expulsion of students.
I lost you, Superintendent.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I would ask that the board approve the modifications to the following board policies: JICDA, code of conduct, JKD, JKE, suspension, expulsion of students, JKD, JKE-E, grounds for suspension and expulsion, and JKD, JKE-R, suspension, expulsion of students. This is on a second and final reading. There were no changes or modifications requested at the last board meeting, so President Voss.
I will move.
I move.
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you need a motion on it, President Voss?
Sorry, what was that?
Do you need a motion on that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll so move.
I'll second.
Mrs. Patron, I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi? Ms. Clementi? Ms. Clementi?
Excuse me, can you all hear me?
You can now.
I
Ms.
haven't been
Clementi?
able to hear. May I ask, please, does this motion include all 4 of the proposed policies?
Yes, yes, I believe that it does.
I just couldn't hear. My vote is aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright?
Aye.
We'll move on then to the consent agenda. Are there any consent agenda items anyone would like to be removed to be voted on separately? Then I will move that we approve the consent agenda items 2 through 14 as presented.
Second.
All call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi? Ms. Clementi?
Barb, your mic is muted there.
Ms. Clementi?
Jerry, it looks like she left the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright?
And I am back and I can actually
Aye.
hear. So please record my vote as an aye.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Clementi.
We'll move on then to 12.0 action items. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. I'd like to, for the board members to consider the following leadership appointment. I would recommend that Ms. Crystal Rasmussen serve as Director of Curriculum and Instructional Programs for School District 60. And Crystal comes to us as a former Director of Student Services at Lewis Palmer School District number 38.
And I will move that we approve the superintendent's recommendation for appointment as presented in tonight's board materials.
Second.
I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi?
Come on, Barb, quit playing hard to get.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright?
Aye.
And Barb, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
She might have to come down from the mountain.
We'll wait a second, see if she can figure it out here.
While we're doing that, Mr. Buck, perhaps you can answer a question for me. With situations like we have now, is it permissible to come back and ask if we're not able to have someone communicate with us? Or is there a possibility we could come back later and ask that person how he or she would have cast a vote?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think that it would be like she temporarily left the room as if we were meeting in person. And so when she returns to the boardroom, we could take her vote and record it.
Thank you.
Mr. Bump, would it count with her having typed in the chat that she voted aye?
It should be by roll call. So to the extent that we can get her vote verbally, that would be the preferred method.
Thank you, sir.
Barb, can we hear you yet? Hear you yet? I don't think so. Okay. Well, we'll move on then to 13.0 board discussion and recommendations for the agenda. Are there any recommendations from the board? So we will move on to 14.0 announcements. I don't believe we have any announcements. So there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well.